Every who down in Who Newville liked the holidays a ton, but where to get great prices on gifts they had no idea. None. They searched and they searched for great gifts under $25. Gifts for spouses and friends and even their toddlers. When suddenly one who shouted, Walmart has what you want, knowing they have Lego, Tree Hut, and no prices to flaunt. So they enjoy the holiday season as who's often do. Cheering and shouting, Walmart has incredible gifts. Who knew? Find gifts they'll love under $25 at Walmart.
Oh, Hilton stay, your beds are soft and cozy. No lumpy couch, no stiff futon, no shower line at crack of dawn. Oh, Hilton stay.
When you want holiday comfort you can count on, it matters where you stay. Enjoy comfortable rooms and friendly service when you stay with Hilton instead. Save up to 25% this season when you book with Hilton. Hilton for the stay. Terms apply.
It's Berlin, 1942. An Anglo-German actress has just been approved by Joseph Goebbels to play a role in a new film about the sinking of the Titanic. She's also on the trail of a rogue spy on behalf of her other boss, British intelligence. Her name is Clara Vine, and she's the brilliant creation of novelist Jane Thynne. The sixth book in the series about Clara's adventures is called The Judgment of Stars, and it's just out as part of a reissue of the whole Clara Vine series. And I'm delighted to be talking to Jane about the books today. Welcome to the Spymasters podcast. I'm your host, Antonia Senior. I'm a writer and a journalist, and it's my mission to bring you all the best writers on intelligence, fact and fiction, historical and contemporary. We've got some fantastic guests coming up on the Spymasters podcast, including an interview with the mighty Paul Vidic. So don't forget, follow us, review us, like, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so we can keep bringing you all the best writers on spies. And now I'll hand you over to me talking to Jane Thynne about Clara Vine and Nazi Germany. Jane, thank you so much for coming on the Spymasters podcast. We're so pleased to have you.
It's such a joy to be here, actually. I love your podcast.
Thank you, Jane. It's actually your second time, so we love a returner guest.
Veteran, yeah.
So we're here basically because, with much excitement, I read that you were reissuing your entire Clara Vine series with beautiful new hardcovers, and they're all on Amazon. And there's a new one. So just talk me a little bit through this exciting development, Jane.
Well, I've been hesitating over writing Clara Vine number 6 for a long time, and I'd written 5, and I'd stopped after number 5, which is set in 1940. The series begins in 1933, April 1933. So that's a couple of months after Hitler has arrived in Germany, become Chancellor. And I thought it would be so interesting to have your protagonist move to Germany. Clara Vine is an Anglo-German actress who's been brought up in England, but her mother was German. And she decides in 1933 she's going to move to Germany, Berlin, because Berlin was the home of the fantastically famous Babelsberg Studios, which is the Hollywood of Europe, where all the big stars, Fritz Lang made Metropolis there, Marlene Dietrich made the Blaue Engel, there was Billy Wilder started there. So it was a really, really fantastic studios until 1933, when Hitler arrived and sacked all the Jewish artists. So Clara arrives in April 1933 and discovers a kind of Berlin in tumult. And I was very interested to chart what it would be like for somebody who didn't know Germany to come and to see the gradual creep of fascism, but also how that impacted on the domestic and social life of people. And the very specific thing I wanted to explore was the lives of the VIP women. I'd got interested in this because of Bashar al-Assad's wife, Asma, in Syria. And she had grown up in England and she had moved to Syria, and she'd been a normal English girl having a kind of middle-class English upbringing. And suddenly she was married to this man who was guilty of atrocities and steeped in blood. And I thought, what would it feel like if the man you married became this kind of monster? And so I was very interested in the wives of the senior Nazi VIPs, Magda Goebbels, Emmy Goering, Anneliese von Ribbentrop, Eva Braun, obviously. And I was very interested in what it was like for them. So that, in a way, the Clara Vine books also touch on the lives of the VIP women, and Clara wends her way through their world as well.
It's really really clever, because obviously it would be quite difficult to make one of those women the protagonist, because they're not going to be sympathetic characters, and that you can't make them sympathetic characters because they're real. So Clara Vine herself obviously inveigles her way into this world, and then there becomes espionage strand which carries her through the next book. So tell us a little bit about A, how did she become involved in espionage, and B, is she based at all on a real person?
She's partly based. I read a lot of memoirs of actually probably quite up-class young English women who'd gone out to Germany and to finish, to do singing, or to kind of go to German school, and it was a quite fashionable thing to do, and who had seen strange things, like, for example, signs at swimming baths saying "No Jews allowed," or benches in parks painted yellow, which were the only benches that Jews are allowed to sit on. And the more clever of these women, in their memoirs, they would say, "Look, I noticed this. It didn't seem right." And then, of course, as you get into the later 1930s, things become more glaringly apparent. So that was, in a way, that was how I kind of charted it. But also, the very useful thing is that most of the Nazi wives wrote biographies or loads and loads of letters. So I went through all of those to get a feel of what life was like for them. And so, yeah, but Clara is an actress, and the actresses in Nazi Germany occupy this special sort of position, because generally we all have heard of Kinder Küche, which is children, church and kitchen, but actually actresses were slightly exempt from this because the Third Reich needed a bit of glamour. So that's how Clara gets to meet significant people. And I made sure that all the people she meets really are genuine people. As far as being a spy, the difficult thing for British intelligence was that they was a difficulty in penetrating Nazi Germany. There were quite a few people up to 1939 who were feeding back intelligence. And then, disastrously, in 1939, the entire network in Europe was compromised in something called the Venlo incident. But up to then, there were people placed in all sorts of places. And so I have Clara meet these significant people and report back. And of course, if you're mingling with the VIPs, you're exactly who British intelligence wants to speak to. And so she meets a man who's working at the British consulate with Frank Foley, and they fall in love. And he trains her to be a spy, which is how she starts sending back information. His name's Leo Quinn.
Can I just before we move on to talk a little bit more about her espionage, I am fascinated about this research into the Nazi wives. Did you find, in your reading of their memoirs and their letters, did you find any disquiet about what was happening, or did you just find supportive voices for the regime that they were helping to prop up?
So the brilliant thing was that after the war, the ones that hadn't actually either killed themselves or been killed were herded into a camp and whiled away the time by writing biographies. So we have the Emmy Goering's autobiography, and we have Lena Heydrich's book, which is called My Husband, the War Criminal, and we have the wife of Baldur von Schirach also wrote a book about what it was like being close to Hitler. And so what's the answer to your question, which is so interesting, is some of them closed their eyes. I think absolutely undoubtedly that they were they were aware of things that were going on. For example, Baldur von Schirach's wife, Henny, who'd known Hitler since she was 15, was the only woman who ever, at the Berghof table, raised the question of the treatment of the Jews. And because he was a family friend, she felt very secure with Hitler. And she'd been in Amsterdam. And she said, "Mein Führer, I don't think you understand. I saw the SS behaving appallingly towards Jews in Amsterdam." And Hitler went crazy and was furious, very angry. She was banished from the Berghof after that. And so she was undoubtedly, and of course, because their memoirs are all retrospective, you take everything with a giant pinch of salt. But I mean, so her view was that she had raised concerns. Ava Brown says in her letters that she sometimes, when she went through bad bits of Germany, she insisted that all the blinds were pulled down on the train. So I think there was a lot of averting eyes. Emmy Goering, who'd been an actress before Hermann Goering had set eyes on her and married her, often said, "I wish I'd stayed being an actress and hadn't married a politician," And so she lamented that. But then Emmy Goering's story is very, very interesting because being an actress, she had lots of friends who were Jewish, because a lot of Jewish actors. And so she was concerned for her friends. And Hermann Goering had a brother called Albert Goering, who was put in charge of a film studio in Austria. Albert Goering despised the Nazis and everything they did. And he would help Jews to escape out of Austria. And Emmy would ring up Albert and say, "I've got a friend who needs to get out of the Reich." And Albert would help these Jewish people escape with the knowledge of Hermann Goering. And so Albert was very, very sensible because he kept the addresses and names of people he helped escape. And at the end of the war, when the Americans had arrived and he was captured, he said, "Look, I'm just giving you 34 addresses, 34 names and addresses," which he did. And the Americans got in touch with these people and they said, "He helped us, he saved our lives." And so Albert Goering is now commemorated as righteous amongst Gentiles, albeit that he was the brother of Hermann Goering. And because he was proud of his family name, he refused to change it. So he died practically a pauper because nobody wanted to employ him. But so that's a kind of fascinating story. And it's those extraordinary juxtapositions that interest me in particularly in the Third Reich, although I think it applies in a lot of authoritarian regimes, where you get just complete opposites existing cheek by jowl. So that was interesting to me. Magda Goebbels, the wife of Joseph Goebbels, also epitomizes another one of these incredible opposites, in that she had grown up with a Jewish stepfather. She wore a Star of David. She learnt Hebrew, and her boyfriend was a man called Chaim Alosarov. And Chaim Alosarov was a big Zionist, and he wanted to build a state of Israel. And he went off to Palestine, which was run by the British at that time under the British Mandate. And she was expecting to follow him, but she, by chance, happened to walk along into a hall where a fiery young man called Adolf Hitler was giving a speech. And she fell for Adolf Hitler. And of course, Hitler was very attracted to her, but obviously couldn't marry her because he was married to Germany. So he introduced her to Joseph Goebbels. So Magda Goebbels went from being a woman who was, the girlfriend of a major Zionist, to being the wife of the arch persecutor of Jews. And the extraordinary thing about that story is that Chaim Alosarov came back to Berlin in 1933 and saw a picture of his girlfriend Magda, ex-girlfriend by then, getting married to Joseph Goebbels, and was just so shocked and did get in touch with her. And we don't know what passed between them. And that was the point at which I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to create a go-between, a fictional go-between, who can who can go between and find out what happened between them. All we do know is that 2 months later he was murdered. So that was one of those stories. I mean, there's so many of them, but that fascinated me about the Nazi wives. And so I thought Clara was in such a good position to explore this. And Clara has a double secret. She's not just a British asset. She's also, her mother is Jewish, so she herself is Jewish. So that's her second secret. So, but what I loved about writing the Clara Vine series is that I've gone chronologically, and so I've gone from 33, and the last one is in 42. So you really see things changing.
I was going to ask, actually, because you and Clara have both come a really long way together. I mean, the first book was, I guess, it's 2013. It's now 2025. I don't want to add 10 years. 2025. So you've been writing about her for sort of 12 years. Looking back as a writer, do you think there are things that you would kind of want to do differently? Or do you think, that the transition from 33/13 to now is has been a smooth and happy one?
I think if I had done, and what I've done in this new book that's just out, is I've brought her face to face with her Jewish family and really explored the choices she's making in just concealing her identity. Because I think realistically, if I change anything, I would have made that much more of a focus, really, of the books. But I mean, she's matured. I have been right. It's actually horrifying to hear all those years, but I've written other books as well. But she's definitely mature. She's 26 when in the first book, and she's pushing on by by number 6.
And she's had some pretty sort of terrifying moments along the way, so she's not unscarred.
With new, gentler scented Clorox disinfecting wipes, clean finally smells as good as it feels. On everything from lamps to ceiling fans, even on your kid's toy shark. Oh, ouch. Clorox disinfecting wipes, now available in crisp lemon. Find it on Amazon. Clorox, clean feels good.
Meet the computer you can talk to. With Copilot on Windows, working, creating, and collaborating is as easy as talking. Got writer's block? Share your screen with Copilot Vision to help spark inspiration, and use Copilot Voice to have a conversation and brainstorm ideas. Or maybe you need some tech help. With Copilot Vision, Copilot sees what you see. Let Copilot talk you through step-by-step guidance so you can master new apps, games, and skills faster. Try now at windows.com/Copilot.
Yeah, she's been in Gestapo prisons, etc. Yes, but she's also, she's lived to fight another day. And in this latest one, well, would you like me to tell you about the latest one?
Yes, let's talk about the new one. Definitely, there's lots to talk about in this one.
Because the woman who is a kind of a feature of the latest one is Hedy Lamarr, and Hedy Lamarr, for any of your listeners who don't know, and I often find nobody's ever heard of her, incredibly, but Hedy Lamarr was very, very famous in her day. And her story is just astonishing. Very briefly, I'll tell you her story. At 18, she was the first ever actress in Austria to appear completely naked and make love naked on screen, which was a huge kind of scandal. And as soon as the Nazis got in, the film was banned. It was called Ecstasy. It was a huge success, but banned as soon as the Nazis came in. And so Joseph Goebbels kept a copy for his private film appreciation, but otherwise. So Hedy then married. She's very, very beautiful. She married Austria's second richest man, whose name was Fritz Mandl. He was an arms dealer for the Nazis. And Fritz Mandl immediately bought up all remaining copies of this scandalous film and said, from now on, your job is basically to be my wife. You will sit in my castle or in my townhouse. You will entertain my guests. You're not going to act anymore. And so Hedy was condemned to this life of, sitting around a table one of the things that Fritz Mandl did was he was very interested in talking to theoretical physicists, because it was a time at which a nuclear bomb was being developed. And obviously the Nazis were incredibly interested in this. And Fritz Mandl would have these dinner parties in his castle with lots and lots of different scientists. And Hedy would just sit there staring into the distance. Anyhow, in 1937, she kept trying to escape and run away. In 1937, she finally escaped. She ran away. She got to London. She met Louis B. Mayer in a hotel, and he said, I'm going to make you a huge Hollywood star. I'm going to change your name. You're coming to Hollywood. And he did. And she became A-list. She was the model for Snow White. Very beautiful, dark hair, lovely, lovely pale skin. And she was very famous in 1940. But in 1940, she was very troubled by the number of Allied boats that were getting torpedoed by German U-boats. And she went to this Hollywood dinner party. She was sitting next to this guy who was like an inventor. And actually his current invention was breast enlargement. And he was talking to her about breast enlargement. And she said, look, what I'm really worried about is actually Allied shipping. And wouldn't it be great if we could just think of a way of stopping German U-boats torpedoing shipping? They went away together and they created something called frequency hopping, which is a system of jamming signals by changing signals. I know, Antonia, you're a very, very scientific person, so you'll understand this much more than me. But it's you'll know what frequency hopping is. But anyhow, frequency hopping, and it was a way of stopping the torpedoes getting through. They went to the War Office, they patented it. They said, this is going to be a huge help. The War Office said, thank you very much, please go back to making films. Nothing happened until the 1960s. Somebody dusted down the file and noticed that Hedy Lamarr had invented Bluetooth, effectively, GPS. And this was a huge thing that she'd done. And when she was asked how on earth she'd managed to do this, she said, I'd spent these nights sitting with my husband and all these scientists just listening to everything. And, she hadn't been an idiot. She may have been 21, but she wasn't an idiot. And she'd listen. She was very clever. So I thought Hedy Lamarr is a great, great real character from the times. And in her memoir at the beginning, Hedy Lamarr says, when I escaped from my husband's castle, 2 people helped me and I will never reveal their names. And I thought, I think actually Clara could be part of that story. So this is, she meets Hedy and they have a great escapade.
One of the things that's so wonderful about your book is exactly that, the way that you take real life events and real life stories and just find these little nuggets and then weave them into your own larger stories. And I think it's so brilliant. How much responsibility do you feel then to the people, the real life people that you're writing about, including actually the monsters? There's quite a lot of, unpleasant people who are cameos in your books. So how do you go about trying to get them right, and how important is it to you to get them right?
Oh, I think the same applies to all historical novelists. But I mean, what was hard about doing women is that there's loads and loads of books about the men and the big Nazi characters, and far fewer books about the women. But what they did do was they wrote letters, they did newspaper articles. So actually, it was just a harder research job. But I very much do feel that need to have some fidelity to what they're actually like, or indeed to actually use their words. Which I've done with Magda Goebbels a lot, because she wrote tons of letters to her sister, so got lots of that. But as I say, I've read all their memoirs as well. But it's obviously a profound responsibility, because it's a particularly serious and kind of traumatic period of history, and you wouldn't want to, for example, paint a kind of rosy view of Heydrich, or kind of, it's. I think other novelists disagree, but I think you do have some kind of responsibility. I mean, the pure novelists would say, well, all fiction is fiction and you can do what you like. But I kind of think, well, these are real people. They may be dead, but I would like to echo their voices in a way that their voices would be. So yeah, that's my kind of general view. I've never had Hitler speak, and I didn't want ever to have a scene with in which Clara would meet Hitler, although she does meet Himmler. And in this new book, she attends a chamber music evening where Heydrich is playing, because Heydrich was a great violinist, loved playing, and would play with the wife of Admiral Canaris, and so it's a little chamber music evening that Clara attends, because what you must never forget is that these people aren't just giant cartoons; they are actually human beings, and it's an important part of understanding humans to know that it's humans that do atrocious things. It's not just monsters, made up monsters. And particularly people always say it's about Himmler, that when you look at Himmler's letters, he's come in from this one particular excerpt of one of his letters where he's writing to his wife about his daughter and her homework. He's just come in from seeing thousands of Jews shot, and he's just walked in and started to focus on his daughter's homework. And I think very interesting to study how human beings dissociate like that. So getting back to your point, yeah, I think you have a responsibility, definitely.
When you were first writing these books, a little while ago now, and you were writing about the 1930s, they seemed very remote. But obviously there's been a lot of chat recently in the kind of wider blogosphere, or whatever you call it, about how the 1930s feel more relevant than ever and how they feel like they're being revisited upon us. As someone who's spent an awful lot of time sort of living in the 1930s for your research and for your writing and trying to inhabit that world, how valid do you think the kind of echoes are, or do you think we're overdoing them?
Occasionally you get really astonishingly shocking echoes. For example, the Trump-Zelensky Oval Office, as I was listening to it, as I'm sure everybody was on radio, and I could not help immediately think of the meeting between the Hitler and the Czech premier when Hitler was decided to invade Czechoslovakia, and he summoned the Czech premier to just to shout at him, to berate and shout at him and scream and not let him have a cigarette. The guy was a chain smoker. Just had an extended period of shouting at him. And the Czech premier had a heart attack. And when I watched the Zelensky Oval Office thing, that technique of vituperatively berating people, it sent shudders down my spine. You see the playbook all the time. You see, for example, the treatment, Trump's treatment of migrants, the way that what psychologists called othering, which Goebbels was very good at finessing, but the way that you taught to see migrants as not real people. When I look at some of the ways that they're addressing the problem, and talking about the problem, you see the same playbook. And that's not to say, I wouldn't dream of saying Trump's Hitler or anything like that. But I'm really, really talking about authoritarianism and fascism and authoritarian, not just in America. There's authoritarian clampdowns on dissent and the imprisoning of people that say things that governments don't want said. Happens in the Western world. I'm sure we can all think of examples. So what we should learn from World War II and the Nazis is to absolutely cherish civil liberties and freedom of speech. And they tend to be the first thing that go, which is why so many of us historians, when you see the attacks on free speech nowadays, get very concerned.
Absolutely. One other sort of element of Nazi world that makes a strong appearance in this new one is astrology. I found that fascinating. Talk to me about that. Nazi astrologers.
I loved writing about this. It's so because so much ludicrousness, but it is also a kind of serious thing. What happened? And so astrology, much more than in Britain, astrology was a huge preoccupation in Nazi Germany. Not just astrology, but all sorts of occultism, magic acts, fortune tellers. There was a huge appetite for them, and the Nazi camp was divided, and there were some people, like, for example, Hess, Himmler and Hess, tremendously interested in this. And Hess, so much so that in 1941, when he was preparing to fly on his doomed peace mission to England, he consulted his astrologer. And his astrologer said, look, you've got 6 moons in Taurus. You're in a very good position. It couldn't be better. Off he went. We all know what happened in the end. And as a result of the Hess debacle, Heydrich, who'd always hated the whole caboodle of astrology and the occult, initiated something called Action Hess, which was to arrest 600 astrologers and fortune tellers and magicians and put them in camps. And this was, so I've got a character in my new novel is a stage magician who's very worried about Action Hess because his livelihood's at stake. But luckily, Goebbels set up something called the Astrology Unit in the propaganda ministry, which was largely, it was fantastic. They decided to rewrite bits of Nostradamus predicting the Thousand-Year Reich and dump them in France and Holland, so that people would think, oh well, Nostradamus predicted it, and they were kind of, they put horoscopes in the newspapers and things. So Goebbels sort of largely ignored this, and Himmler also ignored it, because Himmler was very, very deep into this. But the most perhaps ludicrous element of the whole thing, which I have explored in Judgment of Stars, is the thing that happened in the Institute for Occult Warfare, which was established in the Bendler block, the army block. There was a special unit, and they were very worried. It was the Battle of the Atlantic. It was a very nervous time, and they decided to employ something called pendulum dowsing. Pendulum dowsing was to get a great big map of the Atlantic and have a pendulum coming down from the ceiling, and have some little tin ships. And if you put a ship under the pendulum and the pendulum kind of wobbled, it meant that those were the coordinates where there was a real British ship. And so they'd write down the coordinates, and then they'd know to attack that particular British ship. Unbelievable. But it happened. And so I just think this is kind of, you always get fringe lunacies, but it was an important part of Nazi Germany. And the split between the camps who thought it was ridiculous and those who thought it was very important was there. Hitler's defense, actually.
It's an extraordinary story. I had no idea quite how batty that stuff was in the regime. So Clara, top spy, managing, as you say, the British don't have many assets actually in Nazi Germany at this time. Is she going to continue her adventures, do you think?
I really want to. I mean, I'm currently writing a slightly different series with 2 British detectives, albeit they're on the continent too. And the next one of those comes out in September, and it's called Appointment in Paris, and it's set in May 1940. But I'm dying to write another Clara Vine novel, and I have the plot, and I very much want to. Clara meets Marjorie Booth. Have you heard of Marjorie Booth?
No, I haven't.
She's an opera singer. She married a German, but she was basically a British spy, for want of a better word, who actually managed to live through Nazi Germany, and she's a very interesting character. So I've only got to 1942. There's loads left to go, but no, I've loved doing Clara, and it keeps getting optioned for things, and then not being made into series. So who knows? Maybe one day, but the book's the thing.
The fingers crossed, and I'm sure that the stars would say, if I could read them, that Clara Vine will be a massive TV star, and that this new reissue will give her a whole lovely lease of life. So, good luck with that and all of it, Jane. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for letting me kind of chew your ear off about it, because it's so enjoyable to talk. But thank you.